in the comments section.
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online. We're here all the way through until midday with a massive show to kickstart your week, so make sure you all get in touch as well.
Yes, and you can get in touch on our usual email, gbnews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those throughout the show, as many as we can anyway. But first, it's time for the latest news.
A very good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, Russia claims it's opening humanitarian corridors across multiple Ukrainian cities. However, Ukraine has described the move as completely immoral, as these routes only allow refugees to head to Russia and Belarus. Over the weekend, civilians fleeing the city of Mariupol came under fire as Russian forces continued shelling despite ceasefire agreements. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister is demanding that Russia stops manipulating the trust of world leaders. In his latest address, the Ukrainian president accused Russian forces of deliberate murder and said there'll be no forgiveness.
A family was killed in Irpin today. A man, a woman, and 2 children right on the road, as in the shooting club. When they were just trying to get out of town, to escape, the whole family. How many families like this have died in Ukraine? We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will punish everyone who committed atrocities in this war.
The UK Defence Intelligence says Russia is probably targeting Ukraine's communications infrastructure to try to reduce access to news across the country. It also says it's highly likely the internet access is being disrupted as a result of collateral damage from Russian strikes. The UK Home Secretary Priti Patel said that over 10,000 people have applied for the UK's Ukraine Family Scheme since it was launched on Friday. The Home Office say around 50 visas have been granted as of Sunday morning. The United Nations estimates that more than 1.5 million refugees have crossed into neighbouring countries since the start of the invasion. The Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, told GB News that more needs to be done to support those families.
What is clearly required is an emergency protection visa that sweeps away a lot of the bureaucracy you reasonably have behind a normal visa request, that recognises the emergency situation that people are in. I think you need some way to know who's coming to this country, because I think in the past that hasn't been done particularly well, and these are people who will need support, especially children who fled a war zone.
The government's going to give an extra £74 million to the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. More than £100 million has been raised by the UK public in aid for Ukrainians. The Disasters Emergency Committee said that's the equivalent of more than £1 million an hour since the appeal was launched. Boris Johnson will host Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte today at Downing Street. It's part of a week of diplomatic talks that's aiming to build a united front against Russia's president. On Tuesday, Boris Johnson will host the leaders of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and the Czech Republic. A key focus is going to be renewed efforts to remove Russia from the SWIFT payment system, whilst also pushing leaders to back his new 6-point plan to tackle Russian aggression. The government's economic crime bill, which partly aims to tackle Russian money in the UK, is due to be debated by MPs today. Labour says the government, though, is giving Russian oligarchs too long to register their UK properties, saying the time limit should be moved from 6 months, as it currently is, to 28 days. Well, the former intelligence analyst, Ewan Grant, told GB News that oligarchs only need days to prove ownership of properties.
I have to say, I think the Labour proposal is valid because, remember, these people don't have to look in the back cupboard for the paperwork. They've got their lawyers and accountants to do that for them. They can provide the evidence of ownership and source of funds within days if they want to.
The US is looking at legislation to further isolate Russia from the global economy, including banning the import of its oil and energy products into the country. It says a growing number of organisations terminate relationships with Moscow over the invasion of Ukraine. American Express, Netflix, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, have announced they'll no longer operate in Russia. TikTok has blocked Russian users from posting new videos. Let's have a brief look at some other news now. A new code of practice in the UK is aiming to stop universities from offering students unconditional places if they make that university their first choice. Universities UK published its code of practice on fair admissions following an 18-month review. That began in June 2019. The code advises that universities should not make conditional, unconditional offers to avoid students making choices that are not in their best interests. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll do that across the day. Now let's head to The Point with Patrick and Mercy.
Good morning, it's 10:06 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV, radio and online. Here's what's coming up today.
Yeah, loads for you to really kind of kickstart your week. The Prime Minister will meet with his Canadian and Dutch counterparts today to try and keep up international pressure on Russia over its continued invasion of Ukraine. We'll be going live to our reporter Paul Hawkins, who's in Poland now, speaking to those fleeing the war.
Yes, we'll also be looking into how the invasion of Ukraine could impact the cost of living here at home as oil and gas continue to surge, and how our finances are set to change as well, with the national insurance tax being very much on the horizon.
Yes, I think we need to scrap that, don't we? Anyway, and Her Majesty the Queen has now permanently relocated to Windsor Castle, bless her. It's reported that she'll be taking a more work-from-home approach and will host visitors in Berkshire. We'll be talking about the latest on that, also with Charles Ray, former royal correspondent at The Sun, and whether or not it's time that Harry let her meet Lilibet.
Well, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, and you can get in touch with your views. We'd love to hear them. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We will get to as many as we can, but first, Patrick gives his views on cuts to the armed forces.
We need to reverse the harebrained cuts to our armed forces. If the government presses ahead with its idea to slash another 10,000 troops, it would reduce our personnel to just 72,500, the smallest the army has been since 1714. But it's just the latest round of cuts, this. We've been steadily reducing our full-time trained corps since 2010, when we had around 105,000 personnel. There was a bit of an increase last year, but then, of course, these cuts were announced, so the slashing continues, doesn't it? Now, I understand that there is a cost of living crisis and we have to be very careful about where we spend our money. But surely now most people in Britain would back increasing our defence budget. The fact is that the world is on a knife edge, and right at the time that this country faces its biggest threat since the Second World War, we're currently planning on having fewer troops, ships and planes. For too long, we've put huge stock in our nuclear deterrent and plugging gaps in personnel with high-tech drones and technology. Now, those things are great, of course they are, but boots on the ground and conventional weapons, there's no substitute for them. Now, if you speak to military experts like MP Tobias Elwood, for example, they will say that our military could be about to be pushed and pulled in all directions. There's a crisis that may be about to roll through Eastern Europe. China's posturing over Taiwan. It's often forgotten, but Africa can be a bit of a soft war battleground, and the Middle East isn't exactly a bastion of peace. But it's not just about boosting numbers. You actually have to entice people to join the army. If Putin keeps on the way he's going and rolls his tanks through several other countries, I'm sure that'll get the flags waving and the sign-up sheets filled in. But there is another way to do it. I've already said that I don't think much of the younger generation would actually fight for this country, and I stand by that. But perhaps a way around that is to incentivise them to do so. Large parts of our military accommodation in this country are substandard. The National Audit Office said there was still a £1.5 billion backlog of repairs that the MOD was failing in its commitment to provide high-quality, subsidised housing. In fact, as of last year, more than half of the armed forces, nearly 80,000 people, were occupying single living accommodation blocks, either on a full or part-time basis. And of those, the National Audit Office found that a third, well, more than a third, actually 36%, were living in poorer grade accommodation, whilst almost 2,500 were in housing considered of such bad quality that they were not actually being charged for rent. And another report found hundreds of military families were living in houses riddled with mould and damp. Some were even given leaflets on how to tackle Legionnaire's disease. And our veterans as well. We have roughly 7,000 homeless military veterans. They must be balking at the sight of illegal immigrants being put in hotels and given 3 square meals a day, while many local councils simply don't abide by the military covenant and refuse to give them priority social housing and mental health care. I can understand how in times of peace or when wars are being fought far, far away, it could make sense to cut the military budget. But we no longer live in a time of peace, and the war is not that far away. We have to increase the armed forces budget and do more to look after the people who, frankly, put their lives at risk to look after us. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me at this time. The question mark is, and I think it's one for our viewers as well, and I think we're getting a poll on this shortly on Twitter at GBNews, on whether or not you think it's right to increase our defence budget. We're all feeling the pinch, cost of living crisis, and I appreciate that. But actually, is that an area where we do have to pay?
Yeah, I think the cuts that were announced in 2021, that 10,000, they haven't actually gone ahead yet. That's important to note. And I think the Chancellor's sources are saying actually the things have changed and they will have to reconsider the situation and those proposed cuts that were going to be made in light of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And so I think they've said that they're still going to put that £24 billion boost into defence spending, which is all good. But what I would say as well is that was in relation to, I suppose, boots on the ground. And, the government are putting a lot of investment into other technology.
Exactly, drones,
which is, let's be honest, where the world is going. We need people dealing with things like cyber threats, which are a major form of warfare now, things like that. And the technology can very much help militarily to free up people from needing to go onto the ground directly. So it's not as bleak as it would seem on the surface.
No, it's not as big, but it is relentless cuts, and also as well, it is also as well the quality of accommodation, etc., and the incentive, as I mentioned there, to join our military at the moment. If you know that you're not going to be particularly well paid at all, certainly in the lower ranks, you know that your family might not necessarily get great accommodation, and you know that you might not be looked after once you leave the armed forces, especially if you've got mental health issues, which, let's be honest, go with the territory, given the things that you must be about to see, I suppose, if you go to war. Then actually, what's the point? And I think we already have a younger generation now. I copped it a bit online for this on Friday. I don't care. I stand by it 100%. I think there's vast swathes of our younger generation in this country who just wouldn't fancy it, who wouldn't fight for Britain, think, what's the point in fighting for it, etc., etc. And we do need to give them an incentive to do that.
Yeah, I suppose. But a lot of young people, especially young working class men, would very much feel like going into the military is something admirable, and I think a lot of people from certain demographics would very much fight for their country. So I think slightly unfair, but there you go. Let us know what you think about all of that. GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email.
Yes, indeed. Right, well, the UK has announced it's offering an additional £74 million funding to support the Ukrainian government. Today, Boris Johnson will meet with Prime Ministers from Canada and the Netherlands to discuss the ongoing situation in Ukraine.
And in a powerful address overnight, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to punish everyone committing atrocities on their land after at least 3 people were killed trying to flee the town of Irpin.
Yeah, well, the United Nations Refugee Agency has warned that the exodus of Ukrainian refugees is the fastest-growing crisis in Europe since World War II. And in fact, of course, we've all seen, haven't we, these shocking, harrowing images of people huddled under a bridge and these supposed corridors to freedom being opened up only for Putin to allegedly bomb them. Anyway, our national reporter Paul Hawkins is now an international reporter because he's at the Refugee Registration Centre, 20 kilometres from Poland's border with Ukraine. Thank you very much, Paul, for joining us. What's the latest this morning there?
The latest this morning here is it's a very busy morning here at the registration centre. If you just have a little pan around, you can see lots of people here are waiting to make their onward journeys to Poland, Germany, France, etc. People have arrived here this morning and people are also leaving. We'll show you some of those in just a moment. It's mostly women and children because men aged 18 to 60, unless they have medical exemptions, cannot leave Ukraine. They have to stay in Ukraine and fight. So lots of women, children, quite a few dogs as well here. And here is the registration desk. This is where they come in to register, give their details over, tell the authorities what their plan is indeed, if they have a plan. There's an English registration desk and a Ukrainian one. And you can just see some ladies there just giving in their details. And then if we just look over here, this gives you an idea of, there's, like it was at the border actually earlier that we were seeing on breakfast, there are sort of donations here and people can, they're given sort of food, baby food, whatever they need to help them on their way. Toiletries as well over there in the corner. It's looking a little bit more organised than yesterday. I think they had a huge shipment in yesterday and they're having trouble trying to find places to keep it. And then if you need to stay overnight for one night before you then make your onward journey, there are beds through there. Around 400 beds have been set up in the sports hall, and by about 3 or 4 o'clock those beds are busy. So if we can't go in there to film, but we can just show you through the door there. There are some camp beds set up with people sleeping there for the night. They can stay here a night or two and then they have to make their way on to other destinations in Europe where hopefully they can find a more permanent residence.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's desperate scenes. Obviously, these people have reached over. You must have heard some stories, Paul, of what people have been fleeing and just their sentiments, really, about what's going on.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story. What's really interesting is, and I was saying this earlier, is that, and you may hear it while we're talking to you now, there's a megaphone down, over on the desk over there. Someone will shout into it, there's a bus going to Germany in 5 minutes, or there's one going to Sweden in 10 minutes. Do you want to be on it? There's 3 places, for example. If you can fit your luggage in, if everyone can fit in those seats, do you go to Germany or do you go to Sweden? Which country are you going to go to? Do you speak the language or not? What's the deal on offer? Are you going to get accommodation? Which country would you rather go to potentially spend the next month, year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Life-changing decisions that you've only got a couple of minutes to make. Over in the corner yesterday, we were speaking to an elderly woman. I think she was about 86. Her name was Valentina. She was with her son and her granddaughter, and she was just about to say goodbye to them. Really, really tearful embrace. As they then travel back into Ukraine where they're going to fight, and she's carrying on her onward trip to Germany where I think they were family friends, but it could potentially be the last time that they see each other. So that's the kind of thing you're seeing all the time here. Embraces, tears, lots of great things that are going on in terms of what the Polish people are doing to help, and lots of really, really, really difficult situations for families.
Yeah, and you mentioned there lots of Polish people are helping, and of course we know that lots of people from all around the world are helping as well. Some people even travelling into Poland from other countries to help. Have you met any of those kinds of people?
Yeah, absolutely. There was one chap we were talking to on, I think it was Saturday night. He was from Lithuania. Both he and his friend were helping his brother-in-law's friend, so not a sort of friend of a friend. So they didn't really know him, but a lady and her husband and their 3 kids trying to get them across the border from Ukraine. It is a very long drive north to Lithuania. They travelled through the night. They'd come to the border. They thought that they would pick up the family and then drive all the way back to Lithuania and kind of do it almost in one go with very little sleep. Turns out the lady crossed the border to get, she came across, then she had to go back to get the kids and the husband, but she couldn't get back across. So the family was stranded on the other side. They couldn't get across, and the border staff told them that the border crossing was closed for the night. So the guys from Lithuania, basically they had to spend the night at the border crossing in their car, but they didn't care. They weren't bothered. So people are travelling from all across Europe to come here and help, and it is uplifting and it's also heartbreaking.
No, indeed, it must be. Indeed, Paul, look, thank you very much, Paul, for all of your endeavours over there. And I know it's you're in what looks like a relatively safe spot, but you're certainly a lot closer to the action than any of us here. So thank you very much for bringing us all of these reports. There's Paul Hawkins there, of course, in Poland on the border, just looking at the devastating humanitarian situation. I'm just going to read a couple of views, I think, maybe the GBViews at GBnews.uk. Just people talking about the military situation that I mentioned as well, whether or not we should now be increasing our military budget in light of what's going on. I totally agree with your comments. We need to up our game and look after all our ex-service people as well who are in a situation now. And yeah, clearly people have been quite moved by all of this. People saying cut the foreign aid budget and redirect it to defence. That's Stuart's view. Not sure how far that would go, to be honest with you, Stuart, because our percentage of GDP that goes in our foreign aid budget, whilst I take your point, is quite a bit smaller than I think we need to increase our defence budget by. But anyway, keep these views coming in. GBViews at GBnews.uk.
Yes, well, after the break, as fighting continues in Ukraine and the price of oil and gas continue to surge, we'll be joined by our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, to talk through our home finances. We'll be right back. Well, looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many with sunny spells, though windier than over the weekend. Let's take a look at the details. That's the picture in the southwest this lunchtime. It should stay dry and most of us will see some sunny breaks. The brisk winds will make it feel a bit chilly though. In the southeast and across London, there'll be more sunshine with largely clear blue skies. Chilly here though with some highs of just 6 or 7 Celsius. It will be breezy, but lunchtime around Wales. Perhaps not as much sunshine as over the weekend, and chillier too, especially in the wind. That is also how it's looking as we head towards the Midlands, where it's going to be a dry morning and afternoon with some decent sunny breaks. Temperatures a little below average though, with highs of 8 at best. Perhaps a little cloudier in northeast England though. Even here there will be some sunshine breaking through the cloud. Temperatures here will also be a little bit down on average for early spring. Plenty of sunshine across Scotland as well this lunchtime. Winds will be mostly light, though out towards the west it will be quite windy at times, adding to the chilly feel. Also plenty of sunshine for Northern Ireland with barely a cloud in the sky. It will be a touch chillier than over the weekend though, and feeling it in the brisk wind. There will be little change in the weather this afternoon though. The cloud will push in from the south later, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
and I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. It is just about to go 10:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live, of course, on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now we've been bringing you the latest updates on the invasion of Ukraine since Russia launched its military operation on the 24th of February. But how does this conflict affect us at home? Well, the invasion has steeply increased oil and gas prices. Ukraine is sometimes referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, and supplies of barley and other exports are expected to be severely impacted.
Yeah, well, as a result, the Chancellor is now facing fresh calls for the 1.25 percentage point national insurance rise to be dropped from MPs across the House. Actually, Liam Halligan joins us today, and thank you very much, Liam, obviously our economic expert. And can we actually afford to drop this? Because I know a lot of people are thinking, well, hang on a minute, maybe if we do drop it, we can go for growth, as it were.
I think the Chancellor's under huge pressure, not just to drop the national insurance increase that he announced last year, that's penciled in for April. It's already been legislated for, but he's also under pressure to do more for hard-pressed households facing higher fuel bills, to do more for motorists who are now, given that oil's testing $130, even $140 a barrel, the highest since 2008, they're facing £2 a litre, petrol and diesel. For me, all bets are off, given not just this military conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but the related economic conflict, a full-on economic conflict now between Russia and the West.
Well, we've got a Twitter poll running right now, actually, ladies and gentlemen, which is, would you be willing to pay more tax to fund our armed forces? Well, if we're talking about paying less national insurance, we're talking about trying to kind of get some kind of subsidies, I suppose, for hard-up families, or frankly, just most families who are seeing their gas, electric bills go through the roof, and potentially putting more money towards our armed forces. Can we actually afford this?
I think, look, there are lots of people that would pay more for our armed forces. We've had a reduction in defence spending, since 1989, since the Berlin Wall fell, throughout most of my adult life. And a lot of people think that we've gone too far on that. But it's a separate question if we're prepared to weather really, very extensive economic sanctions on Russia, which, however justified they are, and of course they are, we want to pressure the Kremlin, given this brutal, aggressive invasion. But it is going to cost ordinary people an awful lot of money.
Yep.
I hear lots of comfortable, well-off media commentators saying, we just need to pay a bit more and help people in Ukraine. This isn't like buying organic vegetables. This is going to be a lot more. The price of oil just hit $130 a barrel. Back in December, it was $70 a barrel. That's a huge percentage increase. And I would say that a lot of our politicians, they've been very quick to impose sanctions, and rightly so, but there is going to be economic fallout. The president of the World Bank said at the end of last week, this is an economic catastrophe for the global economy. He was talking mainly about poorer households in developing countries where they import lots of food. And of course, as you rightly said, Mercy, Russia's the world's biggest wheat exporter. Ukraine accounts with Russia for a third of the world's barley and maize. This is huge. But it's not just people in poorer countries that are going to suffer, also people here in the UK and the US, and that will change the political dynamic.
And just talk us through a bit about some of those big things that people will recognisably change, because, OK, 1 or 2 pence here and there, people might not notice. But certainly at the petrol pumps, I mean, over the weekend, I paid about $1.70 for a litre, which I've never done before. Very noticeable. What are those big things people will very much notice?
Well, petrol and diesel, for a lot of people, paying for petrol and diesel is not a necessity. It's not going motoring for a picnic on a Sunday. It's getting to work. It's making money. You're running a business out of the back of a van. You need to fill up your van with diesel or the money stops coming in. I think we're almost certainly heading for £2 a litre for both petrol and diesel. That's a combination of higher oil prices, but also, frankly, profiteering by some of the petrol retailers. And that's why, back to your original point, Patrick, when Rishi Sunak does his spring statement, a kind of mini budget on the 23rd of March, I think he's going to have to bring fuel duty down. I think he's going to have to scrap VAT on fuel. He's getting a lot more VAT off fuel in the first place because prices are so high. So there may be some fiscal room for manoeuvre. And you know what? The Chancellor won't want to climb down. He'll want to be an Iron Chancellor. But the beauty of it is he can blame Russia.
He can blame Russia, and that's always a good get out of jail card as well. Look, I'm just having a look, literally now, right in front of me. My mate posted on Twitter his own electricity personal projection, right? So he lives in a flat with a couple of people in London, £3,205. It's going through the roof, obviously. It's massive, right?
We already know, and you guys are focused on your show on this.
Yeah.
I've been focusing on the money every weekday at 1 p.m. We've been talking about the cost of living on GB News for months and months and months. We were really quick on this. So GB News viewers and listeners know that fuel bills in April are already headed for £2,000 a year on average because that Ofgem energy regulator price cap is going up. Based on current wholesale gas, oil, energy prices across the world, we've now got serious analysts, your mate's not far off, we've now got serious analysts saying that we're looking at an average household utility bill, not of £2,000 from April, but of £3,000 from this coming autumn. That's a huge chunk. And that's why I don't think it's wrong now, whatever our armed forces are doing, however much people of Ukraine are suffering, which of course they are. And yes, we need these sanctions on the Kremlin, but we have to point out the domestic economic cost. It's, and ordinary households, even quite well-off households, are really going to feel this.
I hope you don't think it's a stupid question. It wouldn't be the first time I've asked one if it is. But what happens if you just can't pay it?
Well,
what happens if you just can't pay it?
Patrick, you're completely right. We all know as journalists, asking a stupid question is the basic principle of journalism. Because, to pretend you understand it when you don't is ridiculous. Well, I would say, and I've been writing this for several months now, I think there will be quite mass non-payment of these bills in April. I think a lot of people are going to plead that they can't pay. The government's going to have to step in and increase means-tested benefits for not just winter fuel payments, but warm home allowances and so on. But this is the point. The people that are really going to suffer aren't necessarily those at the lowest end of the income spectrum that get the means-tested benefits and all the additional help. It will be people just above, just about managing, as Theresa May rightly said back in the day. The people who, the alarm clock classes who are getting up every day to keep the wolf from the door, have no savings, living from hand to mouth. I think we're going to have to see major government action in order to counter this problem.
And on that note, you mentioned it's going to change, all of this is going to change the political landscape. I mean, how do you think that might happen? Because of COVID and because of the rising cost of living, we've seen a lot of government intervention in work and earnings that we might have expected from a Conservative government. Do you think actually we're kind of normalising what would have been previously seen as Labour policies and Labour intervention for Conservatives, which might be a good thing because it does draw in those working class votes, doesn't it?
I think that's exactly right. I wouldn't want to overstate it. Our economy is not on a war footing. We are not militarily at war. So let's just park that thought. I don't see British, even American boots on the ground in Ukraine. I don't even see a no-fly zone anytime soon. Again, I know you guys have been discussing that on your show. But we are at economic war. There is an economic war now between Russia and the West. When Putin invaded Ukraine and we sanctioned the Russian central bank, and we're now talking, the US Secretary of State over the weekend, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of Congress, there is now legislation in Congress to ban Russian exports on global markets. The Americans have got the power to do that through the SWIFT banking network. So this is an economic war. And certainly, Mercy, that changes ideologies. When an economy is on a war footing, it does necessarily become more statist. People that like a small state for ideological reasons, for reasons of efficiency, reasons that I would largely support, and I suggest, most of the time you two would as well. We're going to find our personal preferences being upended by necessity, I think, as life gets tougher as a result of these sanctions.
All right. Liam, thank you very much, as always. And make
Good
sure you
to see
check
you.
out On the Money as well. Liam Halligan, there, our business and economic editor. Thank you very much. And, of course, it's today at 1 p.m, as it is indeed every single day. And it's my favourite catchphrase of any show before. You're, go on, say it. Do it.
You're on the money.
Yay! There we go. Right, thank you very much. Well, after the break, we'll be talking about the health impact of liquid-only diets after experts report that diets of this kind may impact your heart health. Of course, it is following the very sad and tragic, shocking death of Shane Warne. But before that, let's have a look at this morning's headlines.
Very good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Russia claims it's opening humanitarian corridors to allow civilians from Kyiv, Mariupol, Kharkiv and Sumy to evacuate. Most of those routes, though, only allow refugees to head to Russia and Belarus. Ukraine has described the move as completely immoral. Over the weekend, civilians fleeing Mariupol came under fire as Russian forces continued shelling evacuation routes despite ceasefire agreements. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the US is committed to defend every inch of NATO's territory.
The United States' commitment to Article 5.
Apologies, I've got a small issue there. The Home Secretary, the UK Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said that over 10,000 people have applied for the UK's Ukraine Family Scheme since it was launched on Friday. The Home Office say around 50 visas have been granted as of Sunday morning. The UK has allocated a further £74 million to the Ukrainian government's budget to help with the humanitarian crisis on the ground. More than £100 million has been raised in aid for Ukrainians by the UK public. Boris Johnson's going to host the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte today at Downing Street. It's part of a week of diplomatic talks aiming to build a united front against Russia's president. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will host the leaders of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and the Czech Republic. The government's economic crime bill, which partly aims to tackle Russian money in the UK, is going to be debated by MPs today. The Labour Party says the government is giving Russian oligarchs too long to register their UK properties, saying the time limit should be moved from 6 months instead to 28 days. You're now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and your DAB+ radio. Don't go anywhere. To the point, we'll be back in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:37 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, indeed. Now, Australian cricketer Shane Warne tragically died of a suspected heart attack on Friday at the age of just 52. The much-loved athlete was holidaying in Thailand and is reported to have just completed a 14-day extreme liquid diet in an attempt to lose weight.
Yes, while some experts have now said that such extreme dieting can increase the risk of heart attacks and pose serious health risks, while Ursula Philpott is a consultant dietitian for Insight Eating, an eating disorder clinic in Leeds, and also a senior lecturer at Leeds Beckett University. Good morning, Ursula. So this is all coming from his This is all coming from his long-time manager James Erskine, who said that Warne went on these ridiculous sorts of diet, 14 days where he only ate fluids, and he'd done this 3 or 4 times before. I mean, I didn't even realise you can sort of survive for 2 weeks just drinking fluids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of the detail around those particular diets. Liquid diets can give you all of the nutrition you need across the day, but as this was a weight loss diet, I'm presuming that it was very low calorie, low in protein and just low in energy altogether. So the impact of just having a few hundred calories a day over 2 weeks obviously is very severe. That's very, very hard work for the body, and can result in things like electrolyte loss or low levels of electrolytes, which can then adversely affect the heart as well. And I think perhaps one of the... Go on.
Arrhythmia, you mentioned the electrolytes there. It can cause arrhythmia, and that's how it can result essentially in heart failure. Not saying that it's definitely what happened with Shane Warne. Obviously, we are yet to find out. But in the context of what we're talking about, that can happen, can't it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think my understanding is that that he had possibly some pre-existing heart problems from from smoking. He was a smoker, we know. He'd also recently had COVID. So we're assuming here that maybe he had some sort of weakened cardiac system. We know that when people diet severely, they get cardiometabolic adaptations and cardiometabolic problems, including low electrolytes, including heart arrhythmias, and of course loss of muscle mass as well from the heart area and the heart and the lung area. So severe dieting, just surviving off very few calories for a prolonged period of time is not something we would recommend. It's not something that you would see in a doctor's surgery or a dietitian recommending. Any sort of severe and quick weight loss would have to be done under kind of medical review. It's not something we'd ever be recommending people do.
And we know that obviously obesity is a massive problem in this country, and actually on the other side a lot of young people are now suffering with conditions like anorexia as well, so that's on the increase. In terms of diet, do you think we should almost now just let people eat what they want to eat? Because quite frankly, all the information is out there, isn't it? People know that if you eat too much and you drink too much alcohol, if you smoke too much, which I believe Warne was actually a smoker, it's not good for you. We should just almost stop banging the drum, because maybe it actually puts people off.
It hasn't worked for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's sad in this case is that he was obviously so desperate to lose weight. He felt that so much pressure to lose weight and to conform to a certain aesthetic viewpoint, that he did something that was, potentially quite dangerous on top of pre-existing medical conditions. So I think that you're right. I think what would be helpful is if people were under less pressure to look a certain way, and I also think that if you're going to lose weight, if you're going to think about changing your body shape or type, it has to be done incredibly sensibly and in a very moderate way over a long period of time. Quick fixes are not the way to tackle weight loss for most people. They don't work long term.
What would you suggest then, a bit of advice for people who maybe are struggling with their weight at the minute, one way or the other, right? So the perception of how they look, whether or not they believe that they are far too overweight, they might be inclined to do something that allegedly Shane Warne may have done, a radical diet, attempt a quick fix. And then people right on the other end of the spectrum with anorexia, maybe bulimia as well. What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I guess I would say advice is similar. Don't do anything that's a quick fix. You know, don't do anything that's sold to you as being a miracle diet or that's going to miraculously help you change your body shape in a very short space of time. It's not going to be sustainable long term. It's not likely to be very effective long term. And I think what you've got to do is look at why you feel the pressure to lose weight so quickly. You know, it's safe for people who are overweight to lose weight very slowly over a long period of time. You know, and if you have an eating disorder and you're underweight, again, it's about getting help and support for the beliefs that you hold around why you think you need to be thin to be loved or to be accepted or to feel better about yourself in some way. I would say that, you know, fad diets, liquid diets, very low calorie diets are generally not suitable unless they are under, medical supervision. So it doesn't work either way for people.
Thank you very much. Ursula Philpott there is a consultant dietitian for Insight Eating, which is an eating disorder clinic in Leeds, and a senior lecturer at Leeds Beckett University. There have been times, this may well shock everyone here, where clearly I've been in much better shape than I am now, but where I've kind of thought, right, I'm going to get on it now. I'm really going to get on the horse, and I have gone a bit berserk with it. I'll start doing loads of running, start doing loads of gymming, start just eating nothing but salad, and I found it easy, which is even more of a damning indictment as to why I've let myself get as big as I am now, to be fair. But I found it quite easy to lose a stone or 2 stone very quickly, but it can also be dangerous. That you get into the habit of doing it, and then actually you feel knackered, drained, and you feel a bit unhealthy.
It's just not a natural. It's a shock to the body. It's not a natural thing either to add weight very quickly or lose weight very quickly. I mean, it does shock your body, and as we heard there, these fad diets, which are lose weight quick diets, can be very dangerous, actually. But keep all your views coming into us. We'll be getting to those shortly. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has obviously torn many families apart. But in some places, families are coming together. A Ukrainian woman married her partner in Leeds after they vowed their big day would not be stopped by the Russian invasion of her homeland.
Yulia Sizkova and Paul Dodsworth tied the knot on Friday, live-streaming their ceremony to friends and family, sheltering from Putin's assault in Lebedin, barely 60 miles from the Russian border. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has the story.
Ukrainian-born Yulia Sizkova was on the verge of postponing her wedding to Paul Dodsworth in Leeds after fighting erupted in her home country. The couple met at Yulia's business, Blinnock Pancake House, in March last year and got engaged in August, and they've been planning their wedding ever since. To bring some light in such a dark time, the couple pressed on with their wedding on Friday. But Yulia and Paul were due to fly to Ukraine today for a church blessing, and are instead using the time to raise vital funds for humanitarian aid in the war-torn country.
Ukrainian people, really strong nation, really strong. We never give up. We always fight till the end. If we know we're right, we will stand for our right. I'm proud. I'm proud of Ukrainian people. I'm glad. I'm a British citizen at the moment, but I'm glad I'm from Ukraine originally. And I'm glad I met a lovely gentleman who actually support me in this hard time, because we want to cancel the wedding, we want to change everything, but we think we have to fight as well. It's our little war as well. If you give up, kind of Ukrainian war. So with our wedding, we try to collect the money and help Ukrainian people who lost the houses to rebuild again, rebuild new life, build new future. So I think if we carry on with our wedding, we can help. If we cancel our wedding, it means like we give up. But I'm Ukrainian inside. I never give up.
So all our money for the honeymoon?
Yeah, all money with the honeymoon. All money what people going to give us a present for honeymoon. If it's going to be anything, it's all going to go to Ukraine. I really believe Ukraine is going to win. I'm not 100% sure we're going to win. And we're going to have our freedom back.
Other members of the wedding party, like Yulia's bridesmaid Vita, are also worrying for their family in Ukraine, with Vita's brother fighting in the army.
You lose all your mind and you lose your heart. But he's telling me, Vika, don't worry, we will strong and we at home. our home, is our children. We will be too strong, don't worry.
Anyone who wishes to donate to help those in Ukraine can do so via a collection box at the Blinnock Pancake House or via the couple's GoFundMe page. Anna Riley, GB News, Guiseley.
Oh, a heartwarming story there, I suppose, of people not letting the war get in the way of their wedding. Anyway, it's just been reported now, just moving away from that, that the Queen will not return to Buckingham Palace and will live permanently in Windsor Castle. Now, at the start of the pandemic in 2020, Her Majesty moved into the castle and has remained there ever since.
Yes, well, we're now joined by former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray, to discuss this. Good morning, Charles. Just tell us why the Queen has made this move.
Good morning, guys. Well, it partially been forced upon her because she hasn't been there for 2 years because of the COVID scenario. But of course, they've still got these renovations that have been going on, and they'll be continuing until about 2007, by which time the Queen will be around about 101. So it makes perfect sense. She's getting on a bit. Also, the Windsor Castle is her favourite home. She's ensconced there forced to be ensconced there in this 2 years, which was quite happy for her. She was there for part of the time with Prince Philip until he died. So she's now going to continue from there and work from home. I have to say, this story was first broken in January by the Daily Express. So it seems to be a bit strange that it's suddenly come up again.
It's reappeared. I've got to be honest with you, I was quite worried, actually, when I first read this story, because I was concerned that the implication might be, you don't want to say it out now, do you? But the implication might be that she's not that well or whatever. And yeah, it's a difficult thing to talk about, of course, because, we all love the Queen. But that was the implication. That was my reading into it. How concerned should we be?
The problem is, Patrick, that every time we hear a story about the Queen, we're all going to be sort of a little bit anxious about it. Is it covering up something or whatever? I mean, at the moment, she looks as if she's in as good a health as she can be at the moment. She's got slight mobility problems. But whenever we see her, she's got that great smile on her face, the smile that gives us all hope for the future, really. But realistically, this move is because of various things. She's been there for 2 years for COVID, hasn't set foot in the palace at all, and the fact that there's renovations are going on. And the few events that she will be doing, she can travel to quite easily without any problem. It's only Berkshire.
Yeah, it's only Berkshire, as they say. But look, Harry now surely, and Meghan must be thinking, I said Freud, must be thinking about, hang on a minute, surely, we've got to at least give my grandmother the courtesy of meeting their granddaughter and having her in her life just barely, holding her in her arms one time or two times, however many. Surely he's got to get a wiggle on now and put paid to this ridiculous notion that he wouldn't be that secure if he came over here.
Well, I have to say, I keep getting these impressions that Harry is, in effect, holding Lilibet or the Queen to, ransom to try and get his own way on various things. I mean, the Queen has seen Lilibet purely on Zoom, which is okay, but it's not perfect. There's nothing like a great grandmother cuddling her latest great grandchild, it's a shame really that as the time goes on, the Queen is getting older, and she's still not seen Lilibet, as other members of the royal family haven't seen Lilibet, and she will be. Interestingly, she'll be 1 year old on June the 4th, which is right in the heart of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And on that day, the Queen's going to the Derby at Epsom, and she's also got a big party, a big palace at the party in the evening. So it's right in the middle of that, and we still don't have any indication at all that Harry is going to come over for March the 24th, the church service in remembrance of Prince Philip, his grandfather, and no any sign that they're going to come over and join in the celebration for the Queen's Jubilee.
Yeah.
Well, Charles Ray, thank you for speaking through that with us. And I have to say, wherever you are, it looks very lovely. It looks very spring-like. It's good to... Has spring arrived yet? Is it still winter?
Well, given by the temperature outside, I don't know where you lot are watching this now, but it's absolutely freezing here in Paddington, so there we go. But, yes, spring definitely hasn't sprung where we are. But thank you very much, Charlie. Cheers for coming on again.
It is definitely spring, right?
Well, technically, but it doesn't feel like it,
can't
does it?
remember which
I was starting
date
to wonder
spring
whether Greta Thunberg's just been
have
full of hot air, for want of a better phrase, because it is Baltic out there.
Yeah. Well, let's take you through some of the other stories you might have missed that we thought might be of interest.
Right. A 2-foot model of Star Wars Jedi Master Yoda has returned from the dark side to the cinema where it was stolen from. So the statue had greeted guests there for the past 6 years, and it was stolen by a masked raider in high-vis clothes in Canvey in Essex.
Yes, well, The Sun wrote about the statue being stolen, which then went viral, which ended in the Yoda figure being dumped back on the cinema's doorstep with no explanation whatsoever.
It is. Well, they've used my idea. It is Return of the Jedi, isn't it? There we go. Thank you very much, everyone. I won't do the Yoda voice. No. Moving on.
Now we have boxing championships, we have kickboxing, and now we have slapping championships. And the first ever slap fighting championships has officially taken place. Contestants went toe-to-toe at the Arnold Sports Festival in Ohio, trying to get the upper hand over their contestants.
Yes, well, the event was hosted by Terminator star, who else? Arnold Schwarzenegger, and YouTube boxer Logan Paul. Now, Logan was left in disbelief by what he'd seen. Let's see, I believe we have a clip of it. Oh, maybe not. I think that was the clip that you just saw, but there you go. Don't worry.
A winner can be determined by knockout if a participant does not proceed within 30 seconds of being slapped.
You crowned the best slapper at the end of it, and you just all move on. You get your trophy.
It just sounds like something a 12-year-old boy came up with. You know, it's such a male thing to do. It's just a teenage boy thing to do. I mean, you can't be taken seriously being a slapper.
Not these days. Anyway, right, so we're going to go to some of your views now. Go on.
Yes, we have lots of views coming in about income tax. We've been speaking about the cost of living. There's a national insurance hike on the horizon. Rob here says, morning, whilst I might not be happy about fuel cost price spiralling, I do sort of get it. But how can the government justify extortionate charges for road fund duty? Does that mean road tax? When a lot of the public cannot afford to use their cars. He says he does less than 2,000 miles last year, and he still has to pay the same road tax as somebody who does 30,000 miles, which is an interesting
Absolutely.
point, actually.
People are sending in pictures of their energy bills, and obviously I'll never read out anything too sensitive, but it's just a shocking price of how much is going up. 2.5 grand. This particular one, Jim's, has shot through the roof, 2.5 grand. I mean, it is staggering stuff. Because as well, you know, we were just mentioning, weren't we, it's a bit nippy out as well, certainly for the time of year. Well, if you get back, let's say you've got a flat with poor insulation or a house with poor insulation, something like that, you shouldn't really... The idea of whether or not you can have one radiator on in your bedroom overnight to stop you from shivering during the night should not really be that much of a discussion. It should not be that much of a decision that you have to make where you start having to look through your bank account and go, oh, can I afford that, or do I have to eat rice for the rest of the month?
Yeah, it's a dire story a lot of people are in. Sue here says, we do not need to pay more in tax. In fact, we should be able to pay less. Billions are lost by government and local councils every year by sloppy work by civil servants and poor procedures for welfare claims. Most of the money lost would be saved by sorting these two problems out.
Yeah.
That's Sue in Cheshire. So, again, I've made this point several times before on this show. Government need to stop wasting money, and actually we wouldn't need to actually, we'd need to be spending a lot less, basically, if we tackled waste by government.
That's Sue in Cheshire, yeah?
Yeah.
I've got a feeling that might be my mum. Anyway, right, we'll carry on. Moving on. Keep all your views coming into us through email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this break.
Hello. A cold but largely sunny start to the working week. Much of the country dry today. We will see weather fronts eventually bringing some patchy rain to parts of the west tomorrow, but they're making slow progress, these weather fronts, up against this chunky area of high pressure, bringing, by and large, the whole of the country a dry day today. We have seen 1 or 2 showers drifting over East Anglia into the East Midlands, still 1 or 2 around here through the early afternoon, but fizzling out. A cloudier zone over parts of northern England, North Wales, but for most, dry, fine, with plenty of blue sky. There is a fairly brisk wind blowing, though, across the south. That is bringing a fairly chilly feel once more. Temperatures widely mid to high single figures, so cold for the time of year, but add on that wind and it feels quite a bit colder across much of southern England in particular. And it'll turn quite cold overnight tonight. We'll keep some cloud across the east and maybe even 1 or 2 showers just grazing into Cornwall. But the vast majority dry, and as skies start to clear later in the night, that blue on the map is a frost forming, certainly across the spine of the country. A bit too much breeze to have too much frost across the east and a bit more cloud further west, keeping temperatures up here. But for many, it'll be a cold, frosty start to Tuesday, a windy day as well. Again, much of central and eastern England, most of Scotland looking dry and sunny, but steadily clouding over from the west with some patchy rain by the end of the day into Northern Ireland, West Wales and southwest England too. But much of the day will be dry, certainly across the east, plenty of sunshine, but temperatures again, only single figures here. Further west, it is turning milder, but of course you'll have the cloud, and we will have some outbreaks of rain, which will just continue to trickle a little further eastwards as we go through Tuesday evening. Before that band of rain, that weather front fizzles out, there is another one waiting to push in slowly but surely as we head into Wednesday. That will bring some rain to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Much of the week there will be dry across the east, and after a cold start, things slowly turning a bit milder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, the time is 11 o'clock and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV, radio and online. We're here with you until midday, talking about all of today's biggest story, lots of discussions with our expert guests and our opinions.
Yes, well, make sure you get in touch with us with your views, as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the show, but first, time for your latest headlines.
A very good morning to you. It is just coming up to 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says humanitarian corridors designed to allow civilians to flee cities besieged by Russia are still not open. Iran Yevgenyushik says that there are nearly 300,000 civilians requiring evacuation from the city of Mariupol alone. Russia said the corridors would be introduced from the city, along with Kyiv, Kharkiv and Sumy. However, most of these routes only allow refugees to head to Russia and Belarus. That's a move that Ukraine have described as completely immoral. Previous attempts to introduce corridors have failed, with civilians coming under fire despite ceasefire agreements. In his latest address, the Ukrainian president accused Russian forces of deliberate murder.
A family was killed in Irpin today. A man, a woman and 2 children right on the road, as in the shooting club. When they were just trying to get out of town, to escape, the whole family, How many families like this have died in Ukraine? We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will punish everyone who committed atrocities in this war.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the US is committed to defend every inch of NATO's territory.
The United States' commitment to Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. That commitment is sacrosanct. We will defend every inch of NATO territory if it comes under attack. No one should doubt our readiness.
The UK Home Secretary Priti Patel said that over 10,000 people have applied for the UK's Ukraine family scheme since it was launched on Friday. The Home Office, though, say around 50 visas have been granted as of Sunday morning. The United Nations estimates that more than 1.5 million refugees have crossed into neighbouring countries since the start of the invasion. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News that more needs to be done to support these families.
What is clearly required is an emergency protection visa that sweeps away a lot of the bureaucracy you reasonably have behind a normal visa request, that recognises the emergency situation that people are in. I think you need some way to know who's coming to this country, because I think in the past that hasn't been done particularly well, and these are people who will need support, especially children who fled a war zone.
The UK has allocated a further £74 million to the Ukrainian government's budget to help with the humanitarian crisis on the ground. More than £100 million has been raised by the UK public in aid for Ukrainians. The Disasters Emergency Committee said that's the equivalent of more than £1 million raised an hour since the appeal was launched. Boris Johnson's going to host the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte today at Downing Street. It's all part of a week of diplomatic talks planned, aiming to build a united front against Russia's president. On Tuesday, Boris Johnson will host the leaders of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and the Czech Republic. The government's economic crime bill, which partly aims to tackle Russian money in the UK, is due to be debated by MPs today. The Labour Party, though, says the government is giving Russian oligarchs too long to register their UK properties, saying the time limit should be moved from the current 6 months to instead 28 days. Former intelligence analyst Ewan Grant told GB News that oligarchs only needed days to prove ownership of properties.
I have to say, I think the Labour proposal is valid because, remember, these people don't have to look in the back cupboard for the paperwork. They've got their lawyers and accountants to do that for them. They can provide the evidence of ownership and source of funds within days, if they want to.
The US is exploring legislation to further isolate Russia from the global economy, including banning the import of its oil and energy products into the country. It says a growing number of organisations now terminate relationships with Moscow over the invasion of Ukraine. American Express, Netflix, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they've all announced they'll no longer operate in Russia. TikTok, the social media platform, has blocked Russian users from posting new videos. Let's just take a brief look at some other news now. A new code of practice in the UK aims to stop universities from offering students unconditional places to study there if they make their university their first choice. Universities UK published its code of practice on fair admissions following an 18-month review. Well, the code advises universities should only use unconditional offers in very limited circumstances, for example, where admissions are informed by interviews or auditions. Around 90,000 children in England have had lessons to brush up on their speech skills following concerns they'd suffered due to COVID. More than 2/3 of primary schools have signed up for targeted language support since August 2020. Well, the sessions are delivered over 20 weeks in each school, with trained teachers providing scripted support to individual pupils or in a small group. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll keep you updated and across the day's news agenda as it happens. Let's return now, though, to the point.
Morning, everyone. Happy Monday. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, I'm Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Here's what we've got coming up in our final hour.
Yes, the Prime Minister will meet with his Canadian and Dutch counterparts today to try and keep up international pressure on Russia over its continued invasion of Ukraine. It's estimated that over 1 million people have now fled the country, and we'll be going live to our reporter Paul Hawkins, who's in Poland for us.
And we'll be talking to our director of Unseen UK, which is a modern slavery charity, about the concerning reports of trafficking gangs, both human and sex trafficking gangs, targeting Ukrainian refugees, especially women, but also children as well. We'll be giving you the latest on that.
Yes, and in our controversy feature today, we'll be asking how a new amendment to Scotland's Gender Recognition Act might affect biological women. The new proposal, if passed, would make it much easier for people to legally change gender. Stay with us for that conversation a bit later.
Yeah, we've got all of that coming up and much, much more right across the programme. Get in touch with us, as always, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on that new trans rights law change being proposed by the Scottish Government.
Scotland is set to become the first nation in the UK to make it significantly easier for people to legally change their gender. The new legislation, published last Thursday, would make a series of amendments to the already existing Gender Recognition Act, which has been in place for about 18 years. The bill makes 3 major changes. Firstly, it cuts the length of time somebody has to live as their new gender before they can legally be recognised as that gender, changing from 2 years to just 6 months. It also scraps the need for those wanting to change gender to obtain a formal medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And finally, it lowers the legal age for changing gender from 18 to 16. My view is this. I think this bill creates more problems than it solves at this stage. Some of these are immediately obvious and already manifesting before this bill has even passed. Others will come much further down the road, often when it's too late. Let's start with the former. Many women feel like moves which so casually relax legislation around men transitioning into women erode the rights of biological women. Whilst J.K. Rowling might be the poster girl for that view, she's just the tip of the iceberg, an iceberg of millions of women who feel the tide of women's rights moving in the wrong direction. There are too many unsettled questions which remain. We can't just rush ahead to making it easier for men who believe they're women to be allowed to legally change gender so easily. What about the conflict between trans rights and women's rights when it comes to women's spaces, women's prisons, women's refuges, indeed all women's services? What about the issues relating to transgender women in women's sport or even in girls' school? And ultimately, who gets to decide what is right and wrong in these situations? Whose so-called rights take precedent? Because I know for a fact that people like me, actual lifelong biological women who have female chromosomes and female hormones running through every fibre of our being, are being painted as transphobes, bigots and right-wing nut jobs for even pointing out the inherent contradictions between women's rights and trans rights in many instances. The fact is that people's rights sometimes do clash. It's nothing new, and to pretend otherwise is to be grossly ignorant. The second issue relates to problems that this might bring down the road, which might not be obvious now. Do we really think that we're not going to see a rise in young people who regret transitioning in the future as a direct result of this legislation? How many people do you know who would say that if a 16-year-old, for example, turns around and says they're transgender, they should be allowed to legally change their gender without ever consulting a doctor just a mere 6 months later? A 16-year-old, as far as I'm concerned, indeed according to the literal law of the land, is still a child. A 16-year-old is deemed too young to buy a pint, too irresponsible to buy a firework, but this Scottish law wants you to believe that just after 6 months of deciding to be a different gender, a 16-year-old is wise enough to make the life-changing decision to change that in law. The crux of all this is this. It's about balance, isn't it? We must, in a civil society, be led by values of tolerance and freedom, and we have to decide on the equilibrium between trans rights and women's rights. We have to establish a robust system of checks and balances when it comes to changing gender. So my personal view is this. It's that it's total and absolute parity between the rights of women and the rights of men who believe they're women is not what we should be striving for. Equilibrium doesn't mean parity. It means extending rights to trans people so they can live with dignity, but doing that without encroaching on the rights of women, which in my view should not be in any way adulterated. Until we have a full and frank discussion about what that balance looks like, then we are in no position to be rushing ahead with this kind of legislation.
Yeah, I just think it's driving more and more people apart, really. And the fact is, as well, as long as women are or feel unsafe, as long as women are put in an unsafe position as well, and as long as the erasure of women is at least a perception of these kind of laws or rules and regs, actually people are going to have a massive, massive problem with it. And that does more, like I've said, to divide us than bring us together, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. And I think people who are on probably the extreme wings of this conversation, the extreme trans rights lobby, they paint it as if it's just a black and white issue, that anybody who raises any issue or raises an eyebrow about this kind of legislation is just an out-and-out transphobe, is an out-and-out bigot, hates transgender people. That's obviously not the case. There's so much nuance lost in it. I'm perfectly... If somebody wants to, you know, live their life as a woman and they were born a man, fine, I'm OK with that. People can live their life how they want to. But here's the problem. It is the case that in certain instances, that person's rights will interfere with my rights as a woman. If I'm if I've dedicated my entire life to practicing in a particular sport, to being an athlete, and then suddenly somebody who's a man transitions into a woman, a Scottish person perhaps, and then they're allowed to change their gender 6 months later, legally, then the question then becomes, OK, well, they're saying they're a woman, I'm a woman, should we allow this person to compete against me? Obviously, as we've seen time and time again, the advantages when it comes to athletics, generally speaking, when men transition, it's huge. We've seen that swimmer, haven't we, in America, who's just destroying every record set by a female because he's a trans woman. And he's much bigger, he's much stronger, obviously.
In Wales, where they've stopped, I think it's girls above the age of 11 from playing in mixed rugby teams now. Well, why is that then? You know, we can't simultaneously be told there's no difference whatsoever between men and women, and then at the same time, you know, be having rules like that.
What about, for example, I have a daughter. If I was to take her to an all-girls school, exactly, would I have to accept that they would have to start accepting biological males into that girls' school? Do they have a right to attend that girls' school, or do they not have a right? Who gets to decide? These are the questions that we still haven't really answered, and people like me who have my views are always shut down, called transphobes, called bigots. And until we do that, we'll have a proper conversation which allows for all views. I just don't think... I think it's just going to it's not going to be good, basically. Let's put it that way. It's going to be very divisive.
There's a friend of mine who, obviously, I'm not going to name or anything, but he's got a nephew, and that nephew is being, raised, essentially, as the opposite sex, so as a niece, right? Do you want to know how old that child is? 3. 3 years old. So he's...
Well, there you go.
He's made his decision, and he's obviously going to stick with that for the rest of his life. I just feel like the world has gone a bit... crackers, hasn't it? And of course, it's manipulating rape figures as well, because, you know, now all of a sudden it's like the cases of female rape, as in women raping men, go through the roof. And it's like, well, that's actually because it's men who are identifying as women and manipulating those figures.
And what also bothered me is the fact that the Social Justice Secretary, I think she's called, who's brought forward this legislation, who's, you know, the poster girl for this legislation, basically. She's come out and said, look, there's no evidence whatsoever that that men need to transition into women or use transitioning gender as a way to harm women. If men want to harm women, they can do it as men. But, you know, that's false. That's false, because there are cases, very small number of cases, I have to say, obviously, because these people are deranged, but there's a very small number of cases where men have transitioned and committed acts of violence against women and children. But it's a very small number of cases, and that's not the point. The broader point that she's avoiding is that there are lots of women with concerns about how legislation and how trans rights might encroach on women's rights, and that is what it is. That's a perfectly reasonable view.
I also find it very hard to believe that actually, if you strapped the likes of Humza Yousaf to a chair, for example, up there in Scotland, that he actually really, really would be 100% happy with the latest trans laws. But anyway, there we go. The UK has announced it is offering an additional £74 million funding to support the Ukrainian government. Today, Boris Johnson will meet the Prime Minister from Canada and the Netherlands to discuss the ongoing situation in Ukraine. I can think of another name for the Prime Minister of Canada, but anyway. And in a powerful address overnight, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky promised to punish everyone committing atrocities on their land after at least 3 people were killed trying to flee the town of Irpin.
Yes, well, over 1.5 million people have fled Ukraine for neighbouring countries in what has been described by the head of the UN Refugee Agency as the fastest-growing refugee crisis Europe has faced since the Second World War. Well, our reporter, national reporter Paul Hawkins, is at a refugee centre in Chelm, about 20 kilometres away from Poland's border. Good morning, Paul. Tell us what you've been seeing and hearing from people over there.
Yeah, good morning, Mercy. Morning, Patrick. We're actually, we've moved away from that registration centre. We are still in Chelm, 20 kilometres from the border, but we were there talking to a German volunteer who had driven a van all the way from Augsburg down to Chelm, and he told us that there's a lot of people coming in by train to Chelm station, and we should go down there and see what's happening there. So we've literally just arrived in the last few minutes, but what we have established is that if I just step out of shot here, what you can see here is Polish passport control at the station. They've moved the border effectively between Ukraine and Poland to Chelm station, and you're seeing people as they arrive off the train. These people are coming in from a train from Lviv, and they're having their passport effectively their passports registered. We can actually speak to someone now who can explain a little bit more for us, actually. We've just been told that we can speak to today. Hello, I'm good, thank you. First of all, we're from the UK. What's your name?
My name is Monica.
Monica, just explain for us what is happening here at the moment, what's happening in the station, and kind of the process that the people go through.
Actually, I think that's what you're seeing here is big help for Ukraine. The people's no comments about the situation, because all world is seeing the faces, all world is seeing what's exactly happened right now, and the people is left everything and going out to looking for life. So it's very hard situation, it's very difficult for us as well, because we're trying to do what is possible. That because we understand what's it mean a war.
Yeah, so the people, they come off the train and they have their passports checked, and then they come through here. There's some.
That's only for animals.
That's for the animals, I know. That's what I was about to say. That's for the cats and the dogs, and people have got their animals.
We have service as well for the peoples.
Yeah.
We try to give some hot food. We try to give some sandwiches for the rest of travel. We're trying to do coffee, tea, gives any psychical lift up.
I saw you giving toys.
They really need.
They do, and then here they can get.
Then we have medical point. Man is speaking English as well. You can try to talk about.
Yeah.
They German people help us as well.
They've come from Germany, have they?
Yeah.
Hello. Hey. Hello. You guys have come from Germany, have you?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay. And why did you feel you had to come?
Yeah, we saw the pictures and we wanted to help. We are paramedics and craftsmen from Germany, and we just came here and we got support by locals, and we took over this medical point 2 days ago, and we are here 24 hours since then. Yeah, trying to help as good as we can.
And what are the common conditions that you're treating from people who are arriving?
We have multiple people who have high hypertension. They have a cold.
Heart problems, yeah?
Yeah, like high blood pressure. They have a sore throat from traveling. They are dehydrated. They have pain in their legs, in their belly. Headaches a lot of time. We have a lot of people with colds. Like it's spreading because no one is wearing a mask. And all the children are sick, they are coughing, so we give them something against that. We also have emergencies sometimes. We were in the trains yesterday, for example, because people had some sort of emergency, and we're trying our best to help them if we can.
Help them immediately, and of course there will be the psychological trauma as well.
We have many people with stress reactions, because of a traumatic experience they're having, and arriving in safety here often is the point where we break, and it's a...
Thank you so much for speaking to us. You did a
problem.
great job. Sorry, what was your name again?
Lou.
Lou. Thank you, Lou. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So many people like that here are helping, as Monica was explaining. They're trying to help the people at the first point where they reach Ukraine, at least by train anyway. You've seen it at the border when they come across in a vehicle. This is what happens when they arrive by train, have their passport checked. they're given some first aid, they're given some food, etc., before they then make that onward journey.
Paul, thank you very much, as always. Really interesting insight, that Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter, who we've obviously sent over there to get a first-hand account of exactly what is happening right at the scene. So thank you very much, Paul Hawkins. I thought it was fascinating that that particular individual there, the German medical officer, was saying that it's at that point of safety, getting to safety, that you really see people express that psychological trauma. That's when they break down, and goodness me, it's
I suppose
heartbreaking.
the adrenaline at that point, the adrenaline of getting out of the war zone and you know, getting to safety keeps you going, and then you sort of just crash when you are safe.
Yeah.
But after the break, we'll be talking about alarming reports of coming out of Ukraine, that those fleeing the conflict are actually being targeted by human traffickers for modern slavery and forced prostitution. So we'll be discussing that after this weather.
Hello. A cold but largely sunny start to the working week. Much of the country dry today. We will see weather fronts eventually bringing some patchy rain to parts of the west tomorrow, but they're making slow progress, these weather fronts, up against this chunky area of high pressure, bringing, by and large, the whole of the country a dry day today. We have seen 1 or 2 showers drifting over East Anglia into the East Midlands, still 1 or 2 around here through the early afternoon, but fizzling out. A cloudier zone over parts of northern England, North Wales, but for most, dry, fine, with plenty of blue sky. There is a fairly brisk wind blowing, though, across the south. That is bringing a fairly chilly feel once more. Temperatures widely mid to high single figures, so cold for the time of year, but add on that wind and it feels quite a bit colder across much of southern England in particular. And it'll turn quite cold overnight tonight. We'll keep some cloud across the east and maybe even 1 or 2 showers just grazing into Cornwall. But the vast majority dry, and as skies start to clear later in the night, that blue on the map is a frost forming. Certainly across the spine of the country. A bit too much breeze to have too much frost across the east and a bit more cloud further west, keeping temperatures up here. But for many, it'll be a cold, frosty start to Tuesday, a windier day as well. Again, much of central and eastern England, most of Scotland looking dry and sunny, but steadily clouding over from the west with some patchy rain by the end of the day into Northern Ireland, West Wales and southwest England too. But much of the day will be dry, certainly across the east, plenty of sunshine, but temperatures again, only single figures here. Further west, it is turning milder, but of course you'll have the cloud, and we will have some outbreaks of rain, which will just continue to trickle a little further eastwards as we go through Tuesday evening. Before that band of rain, that weather front fizzles out, there is another one waiting to push in slowly but surely as we head into Wednesday. That will bring some rain to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Much of the week there will be dry across the east, and after a cold start, things slowly turning a bit milder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:27 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki and Patrick Christys on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online.
We are indeed. Now, as we've already mentioned, more than 1.5 million people have fled Ukraine for neighbouring countries. Now, the humanitarian crisis is, of course, spreading across Eastern Europe, and it's disturbing reports, really, that drew our attention today that suggested that criminal gangs are using the conflict as an opportunity to traffic refugees into forced labour and forced prostitution as well.
Yes, well, social policy charity CARE said it predicts a, quote, disturbing spike in cases in the coming months and warning that criminal gangs are known to have a foothold in the neighbouring countries and will seek to take advantage of vulnerable refugees.
Yeah, well, Justine Carell is the director of Unseen UK, an anti-slavery charity running a helpline, providing safe houses and supporting survivors of trafficking and modern slavery. Thank you very much. We're hearing very disturbing reports, actually, today of people on the other side of these borders finding mostly women and children, very vulnerable, who are saying, look, if you get in our car, we can take you to safety. And this is obviously intermingled with the very genuine civilian humanitarian effort that's taking place as well. So very difficult to spot the difference there. This is a massive problem, isn't it?
It is a massive problem because we know that people will target vulnerable people who are in situations where they're being displaced, where they're having to uproot and flee their homes, with little more than plastic bags and carrier bags. So it's really important that we kind of get the message across that, yes, there are many thousands of people helping and supporting these individuals who are being displaced, but there will be criminal gangs operating, and we see them right across the piece. So it's really difficult for us to make sure that we can get those individuals the help and support they need and make sure that they don't put themselves in an even more precarious situation.
And obviously the EU has said it will accept Ukrainian refugees for up to 3 years without them actually needing to apply for refugee status, for asylum or a visa indeed. But what do you think that the fact that they can move so freely between borders, whilst it on one hand does make it really helpful because people will be able to be distributed across Europe instead of sort of just in Poland, it also makes it difficult to keep track of people who sort of go missing and who get caught up in things like human trafficking, isn't it, when borders are so fluid and open in the EU?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a real tragedy on all fronts, and we will find people who will go missing or can't be accounted for, and that's the tragedy of this situation. It's a tragedy of any political unrest and any war. But what we need to do is try and provide the help and support. You heard from your commentator previously around people who are presenting themselves, and once they get to that safety are really traumatized, and these individuals will be traumatized for a long period. What we need to do is ensure we can provide that help and support as much as we can, but also make sure that we can really help and support those people to present themselves, to provide their ID, and then to make sure that we can safely place them elsewhere so they're out of harm's reach.
Yeah, war is a terrible thing, conflict is a terrible thing, but it's not just terrible in terms of the people bombing civilian areas and Vladimir Putin and all these kind of people. It also highlights terrible people like these people now, the human traffickers, who see an opportunity and they pounce on that opportunity. In your experience, when women or indeed children, sadly, are in a situation where they do get trafficked, and especially when it comes to the sexual element of that, how does that process tend to work? Where do they get funneled from country to country? Are they organised gangs? Will some of them end up here in the UK?
Very possible with all of that, unfortunately. We've seen this in places like Syria with children being moved up through Libya. So, this is a real situation. It is going to happen. And we will see criminal networks in some respects working with each other. Quite often, young people, children, as well as women, and also men for labour exploitation can be moved across international boundaries. And we've seen this happening in the UK. And so we need to be alive to that, and we need to provide the help and support that we can, one, to stop this happening in the first place, but then also to make sure that we can help and protect those individuals that may well come to the UK or indeed elsewhere across the EU.
Can I just ask, where is the market for this? Is it just a sad fact that in loads of countries there are a lot of people who just want to pay to abuse a child or a woman? Is that just a sad fact of it all?
Unfortunately, absolutely it is. And it is the case that we see on so many levels with young children being abused and exploited right across the UK. People travelling to other countries so that they can access young children from a sexual exploitation perspective. And so we know it happens, we know it's live, and we really need to help and support particularly the children, but also the women and men who are very susceptible, very vulnerable, and will be in desperate situations. So we really need to make sure that we work with the international community to make sure that we prevent further harm from happening to Ukrainian nationals, as well as other nationals across the world.
Mm-hmm. And what is the situation in terms of modern slavery in this country? Because it's not spoken about often. I believe the Centre for Social Justice has a modern slavery unit. I know that because I previously worked for them. But aside from that, I never really hear about modern slavery in the UK. The government didn't even have a strategy for that until a few years ago.
Yes, absolutely. And we've been working with the UK government, we've been working with policing and border force and a whole host of other statutory agencies, as well as NGOs in this space, to really highlight the fact that it does happen here. We have estimates of a few thousand people in the UK. But actually, we and others believe it could be up to 100,000. And this is where we need to raise awareness. We need to get people to understand that, it happens, labour exploitation, sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, and also domestic servitude, which happens in private households. So it is happening up and down our, streets, our towns, our cities, and also in our rural areas to provide us with food and clothing. So we need to really understand that this issue that's happening in the UK. It costs the UK economy, multi-million, billion pounds every year. And that's aside from all of the trauma and the concerns that we have around the individual.
Oh, Justine Carell there joins us. Thank you very much. I think... Oh, that was an interesting interlude. But, Justine Carell there joined us just to talk, of course, about this tragic case of the fact that right now, as these most vulnerable of all people, women and children are fleeing a war zone, there to greet them sometimes the other side of a border is someone who wants to put them into human trafficking, sexual slavery, etc., etc., etc. And it really is a devastating picture. But anyway, after the break, we're going to be getting stuck into today's controversy. As Mercy analysed earlier in the hour, proposals to Scotland's gender laws would remove the need for psychiatric evaluation before transitioning. You won't want to miss it. But before then, take a look at this morning's news.
It's 11:35. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says humanitarian corridors allowing civilians to flee cities besieged by Russia aren't open. Russia said the corridors would be introduced from Mariupol, Kyiv, Kharkiv and Sumy. However, most of those routes only allow refugees to head to either Russia or Belarus. Ukraine's described the move as completely immoral. The UK Home Secretary Priti Patel said that over 10,000 people have applied for the UK's Ukraine Family Scheme since it was launched on Friday. The Home Office, though, say around 50 visas have been granted as of Sunday morning. The UK has allocated a further £74 million to the Ukrainian government's budget to help with the humanitarian crisis on the ground. More than £100 million has already been raised in aid for Ukrainians by the UK public. Boris Johnson's going to host the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte today at Downing Street. It's part of a week of diplomatic talks aiming to build a united front against Russia's president. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will host the leaders of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and the Czech Republic. The government's economic crime bill, which partly aims to tackle Russian money in the UK, is going to be debated by MPs today. Labour says the government is giving Russian oligarchs too long to register their UK properties, saying the time limit should be moved from 6 months to 28 days. Average petrol prices have risen to a record £1.55 per litre. Diesel is also at a record high of £161.28. It's due to concerns over the reliability of supply amid the war in Ukraine. You're up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Don't go anywhere. To the point, we'll be back in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning all, happy Monday. It's just going to go 11:40 in a couple of seconds. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online this morning.
Yes, now something we were speaking about a bit earlier. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling has criticised a new amendment to the Scottish Recognition Act. If the amendment is passed, it will drop the need for those wishing to change gender to 1, get a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, 2, it will reduce the legal transition age from 18 to 16, and finally, it would reduce the time a person has to live as their new gender before they can legally transition from 2 years to 6 months.
Yes, indeed. Well, Miss Rowling tweeted, the law Nicola Sturgeon's trying to pass in Scotland will harm the most vulnerable women in society, those seeking help after male violence/rape, and incarcerated women. Statistics show that imprisoned women are already far more likely to have been previously abused.
Yes, well, the Harry Potter writer has been vocal about her view that sex, not gender identity, should be the basis of decisions on safeguarding. Well, let's talk to Suzanne Smith, co-director of Women for Women Scotland. Apologies. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning to discuss what is obviously quite a controversial topic. What do you make of this proposed legislation by the Scottish Government?
This is really as bad as we thought it was going to be. There were some very last-minute meetings with women's groups, with the minister, but a lot of concerns that were raised haven't been taken on board at all. And it's also been very clear that there's been a very limited number of people that the minister has listened to. So, for example, on the age, the Children and Young People's Commissioner actually said that they did not think that age limit should be dropped. But they disregarded that. They didn't consult with anybody. We have FOIs that show they didn't consult with anybody outside this very small group, government-funded organisations, Stonewall, LGBTGU, Equality Network, etc. And they were asked about, have they talked to mental health professionals, people working with vulnerable children, and they haven't.
OK. Have you got case studies, presumably you must do, that prove that there are people there who live to regret the decision that they've made, maybe at a very young age, and maybe due to something other than simple gender dysphoria or something like that, where actually they've wanted to change the transition back? Because I'm very concerned, as I'm sure many people watching this now, and you yourself must be, that we're going to end up with a pandemic of 16-year-olds transitioning into a different gender, regretting it, and actually suffering more depression and more issues going forward as a result of that decision, and how easy it was made for them to do that.
Absolutely. We've seen a 4,000% increase in the number of girls in particular being referred to the gender identity services. And most of these children did not have gender identity issues as very young children. It's been given this name rapid onset gender dysphoria, and it's a comparatively new phenomenon. There seems to be quite a lot of social contagion with girls in groups or deciding suddenly to change their gender. There's been evidence from whistleblowers at the Tavistock saying that many of these children have comorbidities. There's high incidences of depression, also of autism. They tend to be same-sex attracted children. And so there's a lot of homophobia, externalised or internalised. And we know now that some of those young people, as you say, are coming through. There are people like Kira Bell and our own Sinead Watson. They come through and they've had, in some cases, operations to confirm their identity and taken testosterone, etc., and are now deeply regretting it. And the problem with this bill, which Sinead raised with the minister, and I believe LGBT Alliance raised with the minister, is that there is no way back, and that people who change their minds could potentially be criminalised. So you could have a confused 16-year-old changing their legal sex, and then in their 20s realising, as many are now doing, that it was a terrible mistake. And there is no way back for them under this legislation.
Yeah, there's a lot of clamour for a lot of things. There's a lot of clamour for Scottish independence. They may well get a referendum on that soon. There's a lot of clamour to stop this national insurance hike, for example. We're going to have a spring statement on that particular issue. There's a lot of clamour for a lot of things. Is there a massive clamour in Scotland for this bill to be passed? Or is Nicola Sturgeon just crowbarring this in? And if she is, why?
No, there really isn't. And the latest BBC poll, which keeps being thrown at people saying, there's a general view that this should be made easier. There isn't. What that BBC poll showed was that most people don't have a clue about that, that this isn't on the radar for most people. What's on the radar is recovery after COVID. It's the impact of COVID on mental health and the economy and so on. That there's a terrible situation in Scottish education at the moment. Apologies, my machine's making a noise. And we've got the highest drugs death in Europe. There are so many things happening in Scotland that are not being addressed, but this seems to be the issue on which Nicola Sturgeon is determined to stake her legacy.
Exactly.
And it's very peculiar, and it's not something that's in the interest of anybody in Scotland.
No.
OK, well, Susan Smith, look, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, very controversial topic, but your views are very welcome here, and we thanks for your insight.
Do you not think if you're Nicola Sturgeon, right, you'll want your legacy to be the way that your country recovered from COVID? You want your legacy, right, to be stopping the attainment gap, which is shocking, by the way, in Scottish schools,
terrible.
right? You want your legacy to be trying to help
they still have the highest
exactly.
drug problem.
That's a legacy. When all is said and done, and, you know, hopefully there isn't a statue to Nicola Sturgeon, if that's one thing I wouldn't mind tearing down anyway. If there is a statue to her, you think, what would it be for? Are people really going to go, gosh, you know what, I'll tell you what, that Nicola, she never quite achieved independence. She didn't sort out our drug issues. Our children are really poorly educated. Our NHS is knackered, but it's well easy to change your gender now.
Well, we do have somebody who has one theory. One of our viewers or listeners has a theory about why Nicola Sturgeon is doing this. She says, Paddy, I think you might be missing the point.
Oh.
The SNP are introducing this in order to look woke and cool to the younger Scottish demographic. It's all about votes. They would allow sheep to choose their gender if they could vote, which, to be fair, all politicians would. But that's true, isn't it? Because they allowed 16-year-olds, didn't they, to vote in that Scottish referendum. They know, you know, if they move towards this, what Paddy called the woke legislation, woke agenda, then they'll draw in those younger votes. And maybe that's all part of the plan, to look like a modern party which appeals to the younger generation.
Yeah, I just think, you know, at the end of the day, I get that. I get all of that. But I just think it's a sorry state of affairs, isn't it? If an entire generation is more inclined to vote for somebody because they managed to make it easier for people to change their gender, despite the fact that they've got an appalling record when it comes to the actual key services of your country. If that's the main issue for people going forward, then I think we are bang in trouble.
And this legislation, very finally, before we move on, it's making... So, essentially, at this point, you have to give evidence you've lived as the gender you've chosen. So, if I was transitioning to a man, I'd have to give evidence to show that I've been living... You
joined a rugby club.
I don't know.
Joined a rugby club.
I don't know what kind of evidence you'd have to do 2 years. This legislation is changing it to 6 months, but it includes three months of that is, OK, show evidence that for 3 months. And 3 months is a reflection period, is what they're calling it. So essentially, in the bill is this 3-month reflection period to decide whether, if you're 16, 17, that you want to become a man or a woman legally and change your gender permanently. I mean, 3 months for such a decision, that's insane, I think.
Isn't there hypocrisy almost palpable with this? So, you know, there's no such thing as gender. We're all fluid. We're all one. But if you want to become a boy, you have to live as a boy. Well, what does that mean? You have to be a stereotypical boy? Are there genders or not?
People do confuse. I think we should just accept if you're a tomboy, it doesn't necessarily mean you're transgender, and that's kind of what they're peddling. They're saying, well, if you're a girl and you like playing football and all this kind of thing, maybe have you considered you might be transgender? I bet you that's what some people in schools are telling kids, that, maybe you're trans. Well, you know, let us know what you think.
But yet again, I am convinced, right, that if you strapped all these politicians down to a lie detector and made them sit it, that they would not believe that this law is actually the best thing to do. I'm convinced of it. I'm sure I feel the same way about Sadiq Khan as well down here in London. But anyway, moving on. Let's take you through some of the headlines of the day that you might have missed. Well, a woman with a full beard, OK, well, she's quite on brand in a way, says that dating has become really hard as people just simply view her as a fetish.
Yes, well, Harnam Kaur started growing hair around her throat at the age of 11. A year later, after a number of tests, she was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome, a condition that affects women's hormone levels. While Harnam has been subjected to bullying, even resorting to trying a series of hair removal treatments. Now 31, she says despite all the challenges, she doesn't regret letting her hair grow and still hopes to find a soulmate.
Well, fair play for her doing her, I suppose, in that sense, you know, letting it grow. It's a brave move.
It is a brave move, yes. Would you date a woman with a beard?
No, personally, no, but...
you're beard phobic then?
I wouldn't say I was beard phobic. I think part of that decision would be the fact that despite being half Greek and half Irish, I struggle to grow a beard, and I think I'd be intimidated on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's quite odd, though, that some men view it as a bit of a fetish, isn't it? A woman with a beard.
Well, there's something for everyone, I suppose. Yeah. Right, anyway.
Each to their own. Yes, a homeowner in Dorset says he faces losing a quarter of his garden if council plans go ahead to reroute a public footpath through his back garden.
This one cracks me up. This is like a classic local news story. You love to see it. So Neil Mattingley blames a misinterpretation of a 65-year-old map, which was copied several times over the years, but shows no sign of a footpath. So the local historian claims the footpath did not come up in any searches when buying his property 14 years ago. Dorset Council say they're continuing to look into the matter. But basically, in a nutshell, this guy wants a... presumably wasn't at a town council planning meeting because he wouldn't have known that this was even going to go through his garden, and was told there's going to be a public footpath through your back garden. What I do in that situation is make it as unpalatable for people to walk through my back garden as possible. Just constantly be doing the washing up naked with the kitchen sink. There's really, you know, with the window looking out the garden.
Yeah.
Just make it so that no one would ever want to come across that path.
No comment.
That's just the way I'd go about it.
Well, the last two northern white rhinos are the world's most precious animals. Najim, 32, and her 21-year-old daughter Fatu are the most endangered species in the world. The last male of the subspecies died 4 years ago, rendering the northern white rhino functionally extinct.
It's crazy, isn't it, to think about these things going extinct and the amount of creatures that we are probably going to watch go extinct during the course of our lifetimes. But anyway, scientists have made 8 visits to the pair in central Kenya since 2019 to harvest their eggs, I suppose, which were then flown to an Italian laboratory to be fertilised with the long-frozen sperm of their species' last males. I mean, can you imagine being the last of your species? I appreciate they're probably not aware of this fact, but you imagine being that. It'd be incredible.
Be like I Am Legend.
It would be like I Am Legend.
Which is one of my favourite movies.
I've often thought what I'd do, not that we're making light of the sad extinction of a brave and bold species, but we'd never do such a thing, but I've often thought what I would do if I was the only person left on Earth.
And what's that?
Everything. Like just nick Ferraris, be straight out
But
there.
would it be stealing if there's nobody left in the world?
I'm an only child, mate. I'd love it.
Yeah.
I'd prefer it. I'd actively prefer it. I'd have no one nagging me.
If you were the only man on the planet.
I'd have no one nagging me. I'd have no one telling me to do things. I can get out of bed whenever I want, and that bed could be in the Ritz, because I'd be the only person
I think
there.
you'd die quite quickly, actually, if you were left alone.
Yeah, there is that. But I wouldn't have to clean my room because I could just get another room straight afterwards, couldn't I?
just home hop.
Just home hop.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. The only thing is I can't fly a plane, so I'd have to travel would be limited.
Yeah. There is that.
Anyway, well, there we go. Some stuff about us there.
Yes, well, let's finish off with your views, the most important part of our show. Joan here has got in touch in relation to the Scottish Government mending the Gender Recognition Act to make it easier for trans people to change gender. Joan says this needs to be stopped in its entirety. The Scottish Government is out of control. Boris, please revoke devolution now so we can get rid of this dictatorship.
Wow, I mean, that's strong stuff.
That is strong.
Strong stuff. And yes, well done, GBNews, for highlighting this despicable crime against those who are most vulnerable. This is regarding trafficking and the abuses, obviously, that we spoke about there. Some people, some sickos are basically at the Polish border, in fact, well, probably in Ukraine as well, are using this opportunity now, the war and people fleeing war, to essentially kidnap and abuse and traffic, mostly women and children. And they're also putting a lot of men into slave labour as well, this, that and the other. And Carlos, is calling for the death penalty for anyone convicted of abusing or trafficking refugees.
Yes, well, that is an option, I suppose.
An option.
So David here says these new trans laws will only cause hatred against the trans community. Be careful what you wish for. And I think there is a lot of truth to that, because often when something is, quite, for lack of a better term, shoved down your throat, you almost build up a bit of a resentment against it. You kind of don't want to hear about it anymore. And this happened with racism as well, the debate we had around racism. People heard about race and racism so much that they kind of got fed up of it and felt a bit resentful, which I think is always a shame, because I think the vast majority of people do care about other people in society, and they're not bigots. They don't hate trans people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and right, so to finish, we did start a poll at the start of the show. Today on To The Point, we were asking, would you be willing to pay more tax to fund our armed forces? The poll has closed. We had several thousand of you in it. 49% said yes, 51% said no. So it's basically as close as you can get. And I think that's really fascinating, isn't it? Because we could be confronted with this situation. I suspect if we weren't being clobbered with national insurance, energy, gas, that more of you probably would have been willing to spend more on defence. But if we're skint at the end of the day.
I just don't want to pay more tax for anything, quite frankly.
No.
But that's just me. And that is it from us here at To The Point. But don't go away, because up next will be The Briefing with Gloria De Piero. See you soon.
Hello. A cold but largely sunny start to the working week. Much of the country dry today. We will see weather fronts eventually bringing some patchy rain to parts of the west tomorrow, but they're making slow progress, these weather fronts, up against this chunky area of high pressure, bringing, by and large, the whole of the country a dry day today. We have seen 1 or 2 showers drifting over East Anglia into the East Midlands, still 1 or 2 around here through the early afternoon, but fizzling out. A cloudier zone over parts of northern England, North Wales, but for most, dry, fine, with plenty of blue sky. There is a fairly brisk wind blowing, though, across the south. That is bringing a fairly chilly feel once more. Temperatures widely mid to high single figures, so cold for the time of year, but add on that wind and it feels quite a bit colder across much of southern England in particular. And it'll turn quite cold overnight tonight. We'll keep some cloud across the east and maybe even 1 or 2 showers just grazing into Cornwall. But the vast majority dry, and as skies start to clear later in the night, that blue on the map is a frost forming, certainly across the spine of the country. A bit too much breeze to have too much frost across the east and a bit more cloud further west, keeping temperatures up here. But for many, it'll be a cold, frosty start to Tuesday, a windier day as well. Again, much of central and eastern England, most of Scotland looking dry and sunny, but steadily clouding over from the west with some patchy rain by the end of the day into Northern Ireland, West Wales and southwest England too. But much of the day will be dry, certainly across the east, plenty of sunshine, but temperatures again, only single figures here. Further west, it is turning milder, but of course you'll have the cloud, and we will have some outbreaks of rain, which will just continue to trickle a little further eastwards as we go through Tuesday evening. Before that band of rain, that weather front fizzles out, there is another one waiting to push in slowly but surely as we head into Wednesday. That will bring some rain to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Much of the week there will be dry across the east, and after a cold start, things slowly turning a bit milder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm